Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attendance. If you're ready, we shall make a start. We have a number of apologies for this meeting. So we've received apologies from councillors Emmett, Garrido, Torr and Warren. And we have Councillor Lally is apparently on their way, but they're going to be later. Okay, if everyone's happy with that. Item 2 is Chair's announcement and any urgent business. I would just like to introduce Paul Morgan, who is our new Head of Commercial Services. I'm desperately trying to read his plate, but it doesn't quite match what I was told. No, so thank you very much for joining us. Second week?
Yes, it is.
So be gentle with him, guys. I have no other announcement or urgent business. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? This is the point where we make that note. Okay, thank you very much. So, rattling swiftly on to item 4, which is minutes of the meeting which was in July. Are we all content with those? Yes? Are they all a correct record? Wonderful, thank you. I see some nodding. Brilliant, thank you very much. Item 5, Waste and Recycling Committee Work Programme 2019 to 20. So David's going to take us through that.
Yeah, so this is a standing item on the agenda. It sets out the work programme for the rest of the municipal year. Points to note for the November meeting are essentially around budget and levy setting process, which is something which is ongoing at the moment. Thank you.
Does anyone have any comments or questions on that report? If not, it's just for noting, so give me a quick nod. Yeah, happy with that. Thank you very much. Moving on, we have the Register of GMCA key decisions. Gwyn's going to take us through that one.
Yeah, the Register of Key Decisions set out in the report are just the waste elements that may be of interest to the committee. These will go on to the CA or there's a pathway for the decision maker in that document. It's just for noting.
Okay, does anyone have any thoughts on that, any comments, anything that you'd like to contribute at this stage? No? All happy with that then? Yeah, thank you. Item 7 is Waste Management Contract Update. Justin is going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If we move to the first slide, just to give you the headlines for the June performance for 2019. That is the first month of our new contract with Suez. The overall diversion reached 94.8%, nearly 95%, which is a good high rate for the first month. Just giving the caveat that monthly figures are very difficult to look at in isolation. Obviously, we have only 1 month, but the fluctuations and seasonality can be very dependent. But that is a good overall sign, 95% nearly of diversion. 47.9 there, reaching nearly 48% of recycling. And if we then took down to the HWRC alone, up to nearly 93% diversion across the sites, and nearly 40% of overall recycling at HWRCs. That's both the HWRCs from Lot 1, the 9 sites there attached to our main facilities, and combined with the 11 sites that are in the Lot 2 Household Waste Recycling Centre Management Services contract. Other headlines that we normally draw attention to there, the MRF contamination has shown a slight decrease. It's down at 17%. It's still a high level and still reinforces the need for the message for accurate recycling at the curbside, but 17% is actually lower. We've seen up to 19% prior to this. The health and safety headlines, there have been 2 accidents and 21 near-miss incidents reported, and fortunately no RIDDORs in the month of June. Moving on to the next slide. Looking at the mobilisation updates, the first 4 months of the contract has a programme against it for the mobilisation from the original handover from the previous contractor, and that engages with the overall 2P transfer of staff, the replacement of all PPE. The new contractor Suez have a different colour and obviously a different logo, so every member of staff was issued with a full set of PPE in the new style. That was quite a large undertaking and that went well. Equally, site signage had to be changed so that the old logos were removed, new logos were put in place. In particular, the site licensing signs, the permit signs at the opening of the site have to be fully correct and with the right company logo on there. All of that was done, and in some cases on, for instance, rail containers where there were a lot of logos to be changed, they may in some cases have blanked out the old one, and a replacement program for that signage is in place. Equally for the sites, HWRCs, there's a program and an overall review of how site signage is placed and what will be put up there. We'll be reviewing that at an early stage with them for the Longley Lane site to be rolled out across all the rest of them. Equally, the upgrades of on-site display boards at HWRCs for the recycling information that will go up there, and to note a change in that in prior to this contract, the figures that were placed up on the HWRC sites represented the previous month's performance on both recycling and diversion combined, and the future Suez boards will show the recycling level, which is a change. It may look like it's lower, but it's important that they want to get the message across of how much actual recycling and not the combined figure is being achieved at each site. Within the sites, traffic light access systems are going to be put in place to improve traffic flow for the curbside collection vehicles as they arrive, and that will be launched and obviously notified to the council vehicles ahead of time. And across all sites, there will be ANPR cameras for use on both the operational vehicles coming in to be able to identify them on the weighbridges, and also to operate at the HWRCs, so when vehicles arrive, they can see how many times they've been, which sites they've been to. And CCTV across there for both security and other operational measures. Those upgrades are taking place now to an improved system that Suez will control centrally. The portal is a web access for all districts and for all our officers to be able to access ongoing data centrally from the weighbridges, to be able to realise what is happening on a almost live basis. So vehicles arriving, what they weigh, where they're arriving to. That is being set up. It is largely in place, but there are some development items in there. For instance, when the free tip charities arrive, we need to be able to locate them to the districts their material was brought from. So we're just having to work on that. And the Household Waste Recycling Centre data is for the Waste and Resource team to be able to view. So we'll be working with them to get that information so we can see that on a more real-time basis. And also the online vehicle authorisations is for when a Waste Collection Authority's vehicle has been added to the fleet or taken from the fleet, or a hire vehicle has been placed, that we can see that online, and equally the WCAs can actually set that up without having to go through the company as an intermediary. We are also looking at the 4-month stage reviews. For the contract states that we will look at the service delivery plans, the SDPs, as to how the contract will be operated and carried out, and we'll be doing that on the first wave of 4-month reviews has been agreed, and we'll be getting that into place for the end of this month. Well, for October in truth, but we've got all that on a programme so we know what is being updated and when for. Also, the restructure, the staff restructure that will be taking place throughout the contracts. Suez have put forward how they want to operate each of the sites, and that will involve a recruitment and training and obviously the overall cultural change to the new way that Suez want to operate, bringing into place their bid, their contract bid elements that will show how improvements will be made across the operation. That restructure will break the contract area of the 9 districts into 4 sub-regions done by northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest, and they will have a regional manager responsible for each of those. It's based at the materials and the material treatment and reception facilities, and that regional manager will have a balanced split of other facilities, transfer loading stations and HWRCs within their patch. They'll be supported by managers who are responsible directly for each of those type of facilities beneath them, and they'll condense those operations into small hubs that will basically mean that they've got more presence, more supervision, and more control over how those sites are operated in line with what they're calling a layered confirmation support. Support services will report via the central Suez network, and that will include for health and safety, HR, fleet, procurement, finance and technical areas, which will mean they'll get a national level of support, and that will keep a consistency across the way that Suez will operate their contracts and make sure that everything is done in line with a consistent procedure. Over at the Rakes Lane EFW, the Energy from Waste facility in Bolton, the Suez Energy Division will be the control for all of that. So they have a number of other energy from waste facilities, and they'll be running that in line with their central process. So to give you a view of the structure as how it will be, we'll have a regional director sitting above the four regional managers as we described, and then sitting centrally in their Bolton office they have a transport management office with a manager sitting over that, and obviously a contract administration manager who will look at all the central back office stuff. In those support functions as listed below, as we mentioned in the previous slide, they'll be supported by that central division, and as will be the Rakes Lane from the energy division there. Okay. And is that meant to be a blank slide? That takes us to the end there, yes. Any questions on those areas?
Okay, yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Councillor Lancaster.
Just reflecting on what we had on the previous contract and the monthly figures which we used to get, compliance with the contract, which had a lot of anomalies with it, to say the least. Have we used the same contract compliance with documents? Have we changed the documentation?
And you refer to compliance, are we talking about the contract monitoring side
Yes.
elements? Yes, we would cover that in Part B of the agenda due to the
Right, you
crucial
did it.
nature of it.
Councillor Lancaster, did you want to, you gave us some commentary about trade waste. Okay.
Thank you. So, quite impressed by, I had a lot of cardboard, and when I say the lads, there was lads there, not women. So the lads came over and said, have you checked inside for polystyrene? I said, yeah. I said, I'm doing everyone. So I was quite impressed by that. So I started talking to them, and then they said, well, you seem to know a lot about waste. I said, well, I'm on the waste authority. And they went, oh. So I said, how do you find the new operator? And what they said was they find them better. They're not as management top heavy. So I just said, I brokered the question, have you got problems with trade waste? Which they said, yeah. And what I don't, I put on record that these two lads, really first class, credit to the organisation, really keen. But what they were, they thought that builders, trade wasters were taking the mickey out of us. And they knew the score. What they said was, we're Greater Manchester now is probably the only region where we're not effectively sort of barred in trade waste. And his words were, they're taking the Michael out of us. I said, well, how do you think we get, I said, what's your opinion? And he just said, just back us up 100%, give us the tools to do the job, and we can stop all this trade waste, because they're taking me. I said, well, they're costing the council taxpayers of Greater Manchester money, because they should be paying to have that waste taken away. And I've always said, we're paying it as ratepayers, council taxpayers. So what they were saying was, basically, I think it was it Churchill to Roosevelt, give us the tools and we'll finish the job. Yeah. But I was impressed by their attitude. But what they were saying was, yeah, just let us crack on with it, give us what we need and we'll stop it. So I was really impressed by him. It's a good conversation. Thanks, Chair.
That's really good news. Obviously, that you've been getting the meet and greet service that we'd expect, and obviously the checking of the materials you're bringing in. That's good news, and that's good to see that working out on the sites. To take your second point there, yes, on the trade waste, we've got the HWRC access policy that we are to introducing, and basically that will be aimed at backing up those procedures and making sure that they can actually do the job properly.
Okay, was there anyone else that wanted to come in on this report? If not, we shall duly note it. Yes, thank you very much. Item 8 is the communication and behavioural change update, which is Michelle's taking us through, but it's the updated one, and apologies for some technical issues with the original copy of the report. It didn't print as it was anticipated printing. It created some difficulties within the report itself, hence the update. So apologies for that. So Michelle will take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. So I'm just going to summarise the report that you've got in front of you. And then attached to the report are a couple of appendices. So Appendix A just gives a whole view of the current communications plan and a red, amber, green indication as to where we're up to on each activity. And then there's several dashboards attached at the back that just give you a visual update, a summary on each of the main campaigns and the main activities. So just to start at the beginning of the report, the main area of focus is on contamination. As you've heard from Justin, we still have a high contamination across both streams, across paper and card and mixed recycling in Greater Manchester. So we are currently running 3 contamination campaigns across Bury, Rochdale and Stockport. These are where we're going to put a leaflet through every household that has a bin collection and a bin tag. And I've got some examples if you wanted to have a look before you went today of the type of things that we're going to be putting through the doors. And these leaflets and bin tags in those 3 districts will be supported by a range of communications from now up until March, which will include adverts in a variety of local papers, social media, websites, rolling out the e-learning to all staff in the councils and working with housing associations as well. We'll also be working in schools and community groups and doing quite a lot of engagement throughout the whole of the borough in partnership with the councils. There's an example of the dedicated web page at the bottom of the page. So that one goes to Stockport. So for each of these campaigns, we'll be guiding people onto the website for more information and more in-depth information. We're also talking to Tameside Council about running a contamination campaign regarding paper and card. So we've just started working with them. Manchester City Council have invited us to a contamination workshop. That's next week, so several of our officers are going to attend, and that's working across lots of different partners to try and see if we can tackle this in a different way. And one of my officers is also attending Salford Council's Place Squad to provide support on a contamination campaign in the east of the borough. The advertising campaign, a package that we have with the Manchester Evening News and NewsQuest. So the adverts went out in August, will be supporting the contamination campaign. So that was around plastic bottles and how we only recycle plastic bottles. The next advert going in will be around the sports campaign. And then in November, December, it will be around Christmas. And then in January, February, it will be around plastics to support the contamination campaign. So we've got lots of different opportunities there to put out advertising. After Councillor Foster-Grimes, your comment about Snapchat, last time I went back and chatted to my team about that. So I've just given an update there about where we are with Snapchat. So it's not a no, but we're kind of keeping an eye on it. We are still working with influencers, and I'll give a full report on that in the next Waste Committee. We've done 2 blogs with them. We're just waiting for data and feedback as to how that approach is working. I just want to touch on Recycle Week. So Recycle Week is a national event during the 23rd of September. So this year we're working very heavily with schools. We're sending them out a set of resources that they can use during Recycle Week, just to raise awareness of recycling and teach the children about recycling. And we're asking them in return to share their top tips about recycling. And in return, we'll put them into a competition to win a coach trip. We'll pay for the coach to come to our education centre. We're also talking to councils about lighting up the town hall and buildings for Recycle Week. So we've had confirmation from Bury, Trafford and Tameside so far that they'll be lighting up their buildings green in support of Recycle Week. And we're talking to the rest of the councils as well about that. And And then I just wanted to touch on one of the appendices. I won't talk through all of them, but the digital one, we've added a couple of new pages onto the website, and we were quite surprised by the response, but it's quite interesting. We've had a new page on there about business waste, and between April and July, that page had over 2,000 hits, which was more than the plastics page, which surprised us, and it just shows us there's a need to, going back to your point earlier, Councillor Quinn, about trade waste, I think there's a real need there to advise traders on what their duty of care is and give that clear advice about you can't use the HWRCs, but this is what you can do and this is what you should be doing. And then the other data on there just gives you an example of the type of social media content that we're sharing and the types of response we're getting. So there's a top tweet there, the most popular tweet and the most popular Facebook post and the most popular Instagram post. And some of the impressions we're getting, the impressions are an opportunity to see. So that shows that 141,000 people had the opportunity to see that Facebook post about the telephone box there. And the engagement we're getting is over 6,000 people are either liking, sharing or commenting. And we're finding we're getting a lot more questions on social media now rather than email or phone calls. People are wanting instant answers and they're talking to us through social media, which is quite good. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Michelle. You know, on page 3, you mentioned put an advert in the JT, Jewish Telegraph. Yeah, not against that, but in the southern end of the ward I represent, you've got a big Orthodox Jewish community who don't read the mainstream press, especially the JT. What they do read is it's called North Manchester Jewish Advertising. It could probably be a lot cheaper that if you stick an insert, it's hand delivered to each door, and if you stick an insert in there, that'll get there. But anything you put to that community, I need to have a look at it because I need to check it wouldn't insult them. So yeah, but that was it. Oh, I should have said thanks for inviting me to the latest set of Spectre. Really like it. Yeah, but on the berry one, you know, I'm just thinking of practicalities on a sticker to be applied on the inside of the lid on blue bins. Sometimes the bin inside of the bin lid is a bit skanky. I'm thinking any sticker might not adhere. And so, yeah, they put all them stickers in the bins and they all fell off, typical council. But I don't know whether you could wipe them or then stick it on. So it's just a practical thought, Michelle. Thank you.
Just to clarify about the Jewish Times, I've made a note of that, North Manchester Jewish Advertiser, so thanks for that, we'll look into that. I think the other one was recommended by the officers, so I think because they know that there's an issue in that particular area, they want to make sure we're capturing that audience. And just in terms of bin stickers, it's a valid point, we've tested it, and we have had a discussion about whether it's on top or underneath, but again, your officers are guiding us that they want it underneath, but we will bear that in mind, thank you.
We are doing in Bury in November, we're going to do our first schools environmental conference, because I got asked to go to a school in Radcliffe, and it was a junior school, and you know, the kids absolutely passionate when they see, I mean, Attenborough's done it. When you see them whales chewing plastic and the turtles in the fishing nets, and all the kids are absolutely really upset about it. And in 2 hours, I was punch drunk with them because they were asked that many questions. So what come from that with? And it was Talat, one of our officers, who's brilliant, just said, well, why don't we do an environmental conference, but for the schools? So the aim is to maybe have the Elizabethan or the Longfield in Bury. But obviously, I would like the Waste Authority, Suez, United Utilities, Lancashire Wildlife, you know, all up here, and then but just let the kids just say, okay, you've seen all this, you've heard us, what do you want? And just get, because that's the next generation. It's going to put pressure on mum and dad to recycle and switch lights off and all that. So we'll keep you in touch, but I just wanted to tell you, Michelle. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Reman, please.
Hi, thank you for that. It's page 3. It's relating to the contamination campaign, which I think is excellent. Is there any reason why Oldham and other boroughs are not being campaigned?
Yeah, we ran a full campaign across Oldham last year, across all households. So what we're trying to do is, we've not got capacity to do every district and every household in every district every year, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't come and talk to your officers and give guidance, and we've already got a suite of these sorts of things ready to go that can be really easily adapted and updated. So I would say the only reason is because we're trying to target certain areas where the contamination is worse, but if Oldham wants some support, I'm quite happy to come along and talk to the officers. That's absolutely fine.
I think I've got Councillor Ali next.
Coincidentally, my question was exactly same as Councillor Ramon's. When is it likely to be agreeing with the Manchester City Council? Because on the chart is, Bury and Trafford and Stockport are way ahead of in terms of recycling from Manchester. So don't you think we should have agreed with Manchester in the first campaign? The second question is in regard to the 23rd of September recycling week. Which area are target? Is it up to the local authority who are targeting the area, or is it the Greater Manchester Waste Authority for the campaign?
Okay. Just to take your first point, we've got a meeting next week with Manchester. They're setting up a contamination workshop, so we'll be attending that and then following up and supporting where we can. So I think they want to, instead of just running a campaign where we've done this last year with them, have a chat to different partners to get more people involved, to see if we can tackle it in a different way. So there might be something interesting coming out of that in a slightly different campaign, but we're there 100% to support. And for Recycle Week, we're targeting all schools across Greater Manchester. So we'll be sending out information to schools, but also asking your district officers to send to your schools, because I think your district officers have got better contacts with your schools than we have. So yeah, all schools are welcome.
And then I've got Councillor Lancaster.
My question relates to page 18 and the multi-purpose compost research. It's particularly important that we actually move this research forward, because we used to have a type of compost as an authority, didn't we? We used to sell. But there's now so much television coverage about don't buy compost with peat content. I think now is an opportunity to market our product if it's ready to be marketed. So, yeah.
We're working with Suez to develop our own compost and a compost donation scheme. The delay really is that they only started in June, so they want to get through mobilisation first, and then we're talking to them about how do we develop our own brand of compost ready for the spring next year, for planting season. So it's... Not that I'm aware of. Right. I'll follow that up. But we're speaking to the in-vessel composting facilities that take our food and garden waste with a view to taking that back and branding it up, bagging it up, and so that we have compost to sell. One of the problems with selling the compost in the last contract was it's sold on the weighbridges, which is not really accessible to the public, and you don't really want people to be walking about on those sites. So what Suez have proposed is that we sell them in the reuse shops when the reuse shops are up and running later this year at the household waste recycling centres. We can absolutely explore that. I think the issue is the cost, because I think previously we've not been able to compete with the prices that the garden centres can offer, and also offer the volume. So stocking somewhere like, B&Q, places like that, is very difficult because of the volumes that they'd need across Greater Manchester. But if we could get local ones interested, then that might be an option, and we can explore that with Suez.
Okay, if that's... did you come in?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment, really, rather than a question. So thank Michelle very much for all, and her team for all this very detailed work and comprehensive report. I do feel very strongly that the messaging and getting the message out there is so important, that our residents understand what it is they can recycle and how, and that is absolutely key. So thank you to your team for all the hard work on this. Just one thing, I think in line with what Councillor Quinn, Alan just said before about the young people and the children getting excited about certain things. I still would like to see, and this is not necessarily directed at yourself, but at GMCA overall, I guess, more resources put into educating and outreach for children and young people. And I was noticing that the budget for the particular developing school activities during the really, really important and crucial recycling week is relatively low, which is a shame. However, I'm really pleased with the progress you've made on that so far, but it's a general comment to all colleagues, really, that this is an area which is crucial, and if we want to make substantial progress in the future, we have to concentrate on the children and the young people, because it's their planet and they feel very strongly about it. And if they can understand the reasons, and things such as Councillor Quinn has referred to are really important. But thank you very much for all your hard work on this very important area.
Comment on that, actually, excuse me. We are developing a new range of education resources, and we've just purchased a GoPro, and the idea being is that we want to do a virtual tour around the MRF so that we can take that out to schools. We're kind of trying to look at what type of technology we can use to develop some new education resources so that we can do outreach sessions in schools. So if they can't get to the MRF, we can take the MRF to them. So should have an update by the next Waste Committee on some of the new resources we've developed. Yes, we do recognise that.
Okay then, is everyone happy to just note that report? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 9 is consultation response and next step, which I think, are you doing it, David? Okay, let David do it.
So Sarah Mellor is the author of the report. She sends her apologies for today. What the report does is it sets out a summary of the government responses to the 4 recent waste consultations. So those closed in May of this year. Government has then analysed the thousands of responses that they had, and what you've got presented in the report is a summary of the findings. Essentially what it's identifying is that the line of questioning that the government took around the, for example, consistency of collections, what materials should be mandated to be collected at the curbside, they're continuing to lean towards what they'd set out as their preferred position within the consultation documents originally. Now, this is the first stage of the process. What will happen is a further round of consultation, probably towards the back end of this year, early next year, before they then come down on a final strategy, which will then go through the legislative process with a view for it all being enshrined in legislation from 2023. So if we take what's written in the document at the moment, looking at the consistency of collection side of things, if you take at face value what they're saying, what we potentially would need to do would be to separately collect food and also separately collect glass. Our paper and card probably complies, and our other dry recyclables would probably comply. So there's a significant implication there for you as collection authorities, collecting more streams, and there's also a significant implication for us to receive and handle those materials. Now, within the government responses, there are some areas where they appear to be offering a bit of leniency towards that position. So, for example, where you're already collecting bio-waste, so mixed food and garden, and you've got contractual arrangements with an in-vessel composting facility, it's likely that those could continue through to the end of the contract term before any changes were made. And there is also an indication that they would allow what's called a TEEP assessment, so an assessment of whether something is technically, economically and environmentally practicable. So effectively, to justify our existing collection systems, we would have to do that assessment and conclude that from an environmental, economic or practicality perspective, it's better to carry on doing what we're doing rather than make the changes. So in order to address some of this, what we are looking at doing is a study which will look at our existing collection system for mixed biowaste going through in-vessel composting as it does now, versus some of the options and alternatives that there are, such as you separately collecting food and garden waste, and then that going through anaerobic digestion and alternative treatment options, so that we can look at not just the cost benefit of the various schemes, but also consider the environmental implications. For example, if you're going to be running additional collection vehicles for food only, what does that do to air quality, fuel consumption? We also need to consider the fact that if you were collecting food separately, we've then got to find outlets for that material. There's insufficient anaerobic digestion capacity in the country at the moment. And also the assumption is that that food will go through an AD process. You end up with a digestate, which can then be spread to land, which sounds very good, but the land spreading season is only for 3 months of the year. What happens for the other 9 months? So these points are going to be worked through using specialist biowaste consultants over the course of this year, so that we can feed into the next round of consultation when it comes December, January, and the committee will be kept up to date as we develop that piece of work. I think one of the other key consultation responses in here is around extended producer responsibility, and the government are seeing that as a means of generating revenue, which can then be used by the local authorities to offset any additional collection costs, be those ongoing operating costs or capital costs of new equipment. Our big concern with that is that might work for a couple of years, but is that sustainable for the long term? Will it cover your costs over the life cycle of new vehicles, for example? And is that realistic that that can actually be used to generate sufficient funds to cover all of the costs across the country, because every local authority would be affected in some way by this. So this, as I say, it's a summary report. It's very much an intermediate stage of the process. As more information comes out, we will keep the committee updated, and when we get to the point where the next round of consultation documents are issued, we'll bring those to the committee and also the responses as well. Thank you.
So I've got Councillor Driver and then Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, I just wonder if you have any more insight into the government's thinking about the idea of having separate food and garden waste collection systems, because obviously it's combined in Greater Manchester and it works very well. But I know in some, looking across the whole national picture, there's been concerns that food waste in certain areas is not collected weekly, and therefore the government may be thinking, well, we need to separate the collection systems out so we can ensure a weekly collection of food. But I think in the main, I know there's some local variations, the food and garden waste is collected weekly within Greater Manchester. So we do have a situation where food waste is uncollected for several weeks. So it makes no sense to us having separate collections. But where the forests do have separate collections and where they're not collecting food waste on a weekly basis, I can see the government's logic and say, well, we want to encourage people, those forests to collect weekly rather than fortnightly or whatever they're doing. So I don't see the logic in terms of how it applies to us or why we should make a change, but I could see why nationally the government would want to try and ensure food waste is collected weekly, which I know is a point of concern in general. A lot of people, they don't like food being uncollected for longer than a week, even if it's in winter.
The rationale for this comes from research which has been done by RAP, who are DEFRA's main advisor when it comes to waste matters. And what they say is that where you have a completely separate collection of food waste, you get a higher capture rate than you do on a mixed collection like we do. So that's their starting point. You will get more out of it. What they're also then looking at is if you take that food and put it through an anaerobic digestion system, you can generate either biogas to create electricity, which then gives you another benefit, or you can create a biofuel, which you could potentially use to power the vehicles which are doing the collection. So from RAP's perspective, their advice is you'll collect more, and you've then got the potential to produce electricity or biofuel to offset some of your carbon impacts from collection. That's the reason we will do the study that we're doing. to test that against what we're currently doing to see if there is a benefit, both financially and environmentally. But what I will say is I come back to my big caveat here. That assumes that you've got digestion capacity in the country, which if everybody starts collecting food, we will not have sufficient capacity. So the assumption is that this change is going to stimulate development of plants. And the other point is, what do you do with the digestate for 9 months of the year when agricultural land does not require it? And that's the fundamental question for me as to how sustainable that is as an option.
Thanks, yeah. I think what we are suffering from is probably we're well ahead of everybody in the country. We've got a more mature scheme because we're already collecting everything and recycling everything. I think everyone's playing catch-up. But I think if we do end up with extra bins, we have to get the comms right, because they will always blame it as the council. If you're putting another 2 bins, if you're saying this, you know, what we say, this is the law, this is government, and also what you're saying with the anaerobic digestion, because it is a big part of the English waste strategy. Now, I mean, I think if from a practical point of view, that if with the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework we're building all these thousands of new houses, then does it make sense to build a combined heat and power so you could have community heating? And if you're doing that, and if we get the local plan right, and tell these, and you know, I've gone on record as calling them cowboy developers, because that's what they are. They're just interested in making money. That if we insist that if you had a new estate, then right in the middle of that, you had a communal recycling hub, like they do in that Europe, where each household took your waste and dumped it in maybe Euro carts, but your council then, it only needs to go once a day. And you'd have your new electric bin wagon, because they're on the market now. But if that went to a single point, so you're not going around all the houses, you're just in and you're out. Well, that gives you the scope to get a weekly connection, but it also gives you, less emissions because you're not going all around the houses. That was it. Thank you.
Councillor Lancaster.
I think it's an interesting point being made about doing this survey and research work. That's well worth doing. But what work are other authorities doing on this as well? Because we can use some comparisons. It seems to me benchmarking with other authorities may be useful in the exercise we're trying to persuade government. Or would it?
We will be doing work with the other joint waste disposal authorities to share data. And we've also got links into some of the national groups, the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, NORDO, which is National Association of Waste Disposal Officers. And both organisations are sharing the consultation responses with all the local authorities to make sure we've got a consistent message.
Okay, anyone else that wants to come in on that? Councillor Foster-Grime.
Thank you, Chair. I could have quite a lot to say on this consultation, but it's going to come back to us again. So the main point I'd like to make is just the total lack of ambition in terms of the government talking about it not coming into play until 2023. I accept that there are many things that have to be looked at, but in terms of the lack of ambition overall, in the timing, just doesn't indicate to me that they are taking recycling as seriously as they should be, bearing in mind that we're in the middle of a climate emergency. Thank you to David for explaining some of those issues again, and I think we've all got quite strong opinions on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If we're happy to note that, we shall move on to item 10, which is forecast budget outturn. And Lindsay's taking us through that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to report that current indications are that the outturn will be broadly in line with the budget that was set for 2019, even after account of the risks highlighted at section 1.2. At section 3, the levy allocation methodology, it's currently being worked up with a small group of district representatives, so it will be available in time for the levy setting in February. And then just to note the timetable for that at section 4.2. Happy to take any questions.
No, I think everyone's content with that. So we're happy to note that report. Yes? Okay, thank you very much. So, switching over to item 11, which is the date and times of future meeting, which have been previously published, which you should all have nicely in your diaries. And moving on to item 12, which is exclusion of press and public for the restricted part of the agenda. So just give that a moment for the live feed to be switched off.